Hey, you guys, this is the Couplings Fire podcast. Here's a couple of things you might need to know, or maybe you just forgot. I'm Taylor, a volunteer firefighter and also a fireway to my favorite firefighter. Join me as I talk anything and everything fire related. I don't claim to be an expert, I just love to talk fire, and I'm not afraid to get into real and deep discussions. Everything I say is my own opinion and does not reflect the opinions of any agency or organization I am associated with. Let's get on with the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Couplings Fire podcast. I am happy to have you here with me, with us. I can actually say us this time because there's somebody with me. I'm not doing another solo episode. I'm so excited to get guests back on again. And this one has been interesting because we tried recording before and I had to cancel on us because I had a storm rolling through, and that was interesting. But finally, for his debut on this podcast, I have Lance Routson from the Iowa Fire Flyer podcast. Now, hold on, I have to slow that down. Iowa Fire Flyer podcast.
Got it. Yeah, you got it. Kind of a tongue twister, isn't it?
It definitely is, but I want to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying. I'm not saying firefighter, it's fire flyer. So, Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lance, for coming on.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Taylor. It's a great to be here. I've been listening to your show for a long time, and I actually one of your previous guests, David Stender, was how I came across your show. So I met David at a fire school in Iowa. That's where I live and work, and through his social media accounts, I saw that you had talked to him, and then I listened to it, and that was how I found you. So love listening to your stuff. Thanks for what you do. You do some amazing things, but certainly the talent that you have and the things that you discuss on your podcast are really important things. And there's a lot of people that appreciate it, myself included, for your work. So thanks for doing that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, David, for sharing this so that I could actually get a chance to meet Lance. Cause we've already been talking for like half an hour now, and this has been amazing. And I can't stop laughing and smiling. So this is going to be a great episode.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Lance, tell me first off where you are now in your fire career.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks. So right now I am working as the deputy chief of operations at my department. I work in suburban Des Moines over in Iowa, and I've been with that department for about two and a half years, coming up to 3. I'm 41 years old, so I'm a little more than halfway through this whole gig. I've been doing it for as a career for a while, but my roots are in the volunteer fire service here in Iowa. And really to kind of give everybody the full story on that. So I started my path to becoming a firefighter is a little bit, I would say it's a little bit unorthodox. You hear those stories about how people, ever since they were a little kid, fire trucks, and that's what I want to do. And I wasn't that way necessarily. I played sports in high school, and that was really all I was worried about. And before I knew it, I found myself going off to my first year of college, and I played a year of NCAA Division III baseball. And I woke up one day and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think I'd found myself in a position where I was kind of there because everybody thought I should be there, but I didn't think I should be there. And it was kind of hard to come to that realization. It kind of shakes you to the core. But when I was growing up, my father was a 30-year veteran of law enforcement, and he's a United States Marine. So the mentality of that comes along with that was in my family growing up. It was all I knew. And I remember my father would, when he was on patrol as a deputy sheriff in the Des Moines area, he would work overnights, midnight shifts. And I remember we would eat steak at 8 or 6 o'clock the night before, and he'd come home at 7 a.m. and reheat it and eat it like it was nothing. And I remember thinking, this is so bizarre, but it was all that I knew. Right. But my dad taught me a lot of things, and as did my mom. But my one thing I always remember about my dad was I always wanted to be like him. He's a big guy. I mean, he's about 6'6", about 250. And he when he wore his uniform, and he was proud of what he did, and he made a difference, right? So as I went off and found myself in undergrad, and kind of going through the motions, and I really, I had to have that conversation. What do I want to do? And I didn't know for sure, but I knew a uniform meant something to me. Being on a team meant something to me. Being a part of something bigger than yourself meant something to me. Being there for people on their worst days meant something to me. And so I continued on in my undergrad, and I have a twin sister, and we were the first, one of the first members of our family to actually graduate from college. Our parents had always wanted us to do that growing up. So that was important to finish that. And I did that, but I got about halfway through, and I came back to my hometown for a summer from undergrad, which is in Johnston, Iowa, another suburb of Des Moines. And I ran into a high school friend of mine who'd been a volunteer firefighter, and basically said, "Hey, come check it out." So I did. And, as the story goes, I was hooked.
That's usually how it goes.
Yep. Yep. I could, to this day, I can still remember the first two calls I ever went on that volunteer agency, and that volunteer agency has grown and evolved a lot. It's that it is no longer a volunteer agency. I should say the agency itself has grown and changed, but that was what got me into it. And then I went through undergrad and started testing from there, and eventually found a spot. But that's kind of the brief overview of how I ended up getting into the job to begin with. And since being fortunate and blessed to find myself in a position where I could get a job, I just kind of haven't looked back. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a fun story to
Yeah,
go back through
yeah.
with everything too. So I guess, how did you know that baseball wasn't for you? Because I know I let you skip right over that and everything.
Oh,
I was
that's
gonna
why.
go back
That's
and
a
ask you,
great question.
but I
That's
feel like that's hard, especially that young.
yeah, it's a really good question.
And okay, we think of ourselves as very grown up when we go to college and stuff, but we're not. I
Right.
mean, we're not. I thought I was, and then I grew up more, and I'm like, oh, I was not grown up at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do you actually know? Like, that is such a big decision to make,
Yeah.
and especially where you just like one day I just decided it wasn't for me, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, there's a couple things. Number one was I was very fortunate growing up, and I had been blessed with some athletic success. But when I went to that next level, I wasn't having that anymore. And it was really at a point where you really had to commit to it, and it was a year-round thing, even at that level. And I just wasn't mentally there, and
Yeah.
it showed. I did not play well. Other players were better. They were just better, and they wanted it more. And it was, I think that one of the hardest parts for me was being at peace with that. Like, it's okay to just say, I'm not, that's enough. I don't want to do this anymore. You feel like you're going to let people down because, like I had said, I think people expected you to just keep doing that. But it was no secret. I wasn't going to be starting for the Chicago Cubs someday. I wasn't, I wasn't in the cards, but that was one thing was I didn't have the drive that other people did. And I think, in my opinion, out of fairness to the game and the players that did have that drive, it did not make sense for me to continue to be there in that capacity. But the other thing I would say is that, I guess some ways it's good, some ways it's bad, but I always have a pretty guilty conscience. So if I do something I shouldn't be doing, I usually know, and I'm kind of my biggest critic type thing. When I made that decision, I didn't feel guilty about it, and I didn't feel like I'd made a mistake. And there have been times in my life where I had made decisions that were wrong for, all through life, but this was one that it was kind of like, it was very liberating to be done with that phase of my life. Doesn't mean discount it or forget it, but be done with it and move on. And that was where I really started to make the change to look and, and it obviously it led me to where I am now, but, I had to really answer that question. What am I going to do with my life? And I just took a little bit longer to get there than some, I guess. But yeah, there was a couple of days where it was pretty strange, because that is one of the few things that I had known for so long, and then it was gone, but of my own choice, of course. But
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about it. We've been taught since such a young age, pretty much all of us, that if you quit something, you're a quitter, and that's not good, and
Yep.
you should be shamed, and whatever it is, right, to finish it out, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're sometimes it's the right call to quit something. Sometimes it's not for you. And it's something that, like, when it comes to even the volunteer fire service world, some people are going to try it. They're going to want to come in, but they're not going to like it.
Right.
And it's okay if they quit. It's okay if they're gone in 6 months. It's okay if they're gone in a year or 3 years. And I know it frustrates us because we put so much time and effort into training them. You're like, we had such high hopes for you. You're supposed to fit in. What happened? But sometimes it's just not the right fit.
That's right. One of my former bosses used to say that. He would tell us, that particularly when it came to testing time and hiring time and adding volunteers, and he would say, firefighting is not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not mean that in a negative light. There are some people that are wired to do certain things, not do others. I believe he's right. Just like you said, it's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Now, I never thought that I would be wired to do this stuff, being very honest. It does not fit with like the rest of my personality. I don't feel like it's like, wait, why am I wired this way? But it fits. And it's one thing that's like, if I tell anybody you even have an inkling that you want to try it or whatever, like even just a little spark of like, that looks like a little fun, you should go try whatever it is, because maybe it is for you.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think it is about it that draws you to it? Like it does. Have you been able to identify that yet?
Well, in the beginning, honestly, it was the adrenaline rush, and it was the fantastic of it all, right? It was just so awesome. And that was definitely the beginning initial pull for me. Past that, like what's actually kept me in it is it's a chance. I love learning. I love learning. And this has so many avenues, and it's so fun. And there's so much more to grab and pick and everything. And of course, I love to help people, right? Yep. But that's probably not the top reason why I stay in it. It's probably because of all the other little things that I can go learn and find out and work on, right? Because I like improvement.
Yeah.
So that is definitely what's kept me in it. And then, of course, like I said, I love helping people. And that's why I do this thing instead of doing something else, because this is something I love learning about. And it's something that I should, if I'm spending enough time learning it and stuff like that, I should be giving back in ways that other people can't.
Sure.
So,
that's awesome. And
what about you, by the way? So,
that's a great question. And I would echo many of the things that you just said right there. What I would add to it also is that, we look at what's going on in the world, mm-hmm. right? And everything, the state of society, pandemics, everything. And it's hard to find the positive in the world sometimes. But the word I use to describe our profession, and notice I use that word because it has zero to do with whether you're volunteer, paid on call, part-time, full. It doesn't matter. It's a profession that we all contribute to. But the word I use is righteous. It's a very righteous job, and it's something that no one can ever take from you unless you let them. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, when if you're doing it for a career, you leave your shift and you go home, or you're a volunteer and you end that call serving your community, you can walk away with that knowing that you did the best you could to help somebody that needed help, and you did it because you were trying to do the right thing. And no amount of negativity can take away from someone's empathy and someone's wanting to help others in their time of need. And I use the word righteous to describe. It's a righteous job.
I love that.
Yeah, you're right.
That is just a good encompassing word for it.
It is. And like you said, we talked about only certain people really can, this job only fits certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean, and where would like to go with that is that we need to, I think that we need to, as folks that like yourself, and what I've chosen to do with my life, that we need to respect that and honor that,
Mm-hmm.
because there are people that want to be like you, and there's people that want to be in the fire department, but they're unable to for whatever reason, whether that's they don't like masks on their face, or they don't like heights, or some kind of physical restraint, whatever it is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But out of respect for the job and respect for those people, I think it's something that we need to hold in pretty high regard. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that was a fantastic answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for adding that on, because yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I wonder how, I don't know, just spitballing here, rabbit trail already. So how do we find people who fit this mold?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't even know where to begin to find people that fit that mold, other than just kind of grabbing everybody.
Yeah, and I think that the answer kind of it kind of depends on the environment, right? So, again, having my bases in the volunteer fire service, when you look at the volunteer contingent, in which Iowa predominantly is, of course, now the fire department has to compete with everything else in the lives of a volunteer, right?
Yes.
And holy cow, we're talking competitive baseball leagues at 7 years old, and every other sport, and school activities and music and traveling and vacations and your full-time job if you're doing it as a volunteer, and
self-care days and
self-care. Yeah.
Like,
you're right.
I mean, things that are needed, things that should be held in high regard, but there's just so many requirements for a person nowadays. Like I thought I was not busy. And then these last 2 weeks proved me wrong how busy I actually am. And it's like, whoa, I don't have time for anything. I'm not involved in that much. I don't feel like, but the stuff I'm involved in takes a lot of time.
A lot of time.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't even have kids yet.
Right. Wait till that element gets in there, and then it adds a whole new realm. But you're right. I mean, there's things pulling at you everywhere, and how to as a volunteer, how to find that volunteer that can successfully manage that. It's hard to do. And even and more so towards the career side here, I think the career side needs to. I would just say this. If we keep doing what we've always done and expect something different to happen, then we're crazy, right?
Yes,
So
I agree.
we have to look at different demographics, or look at how the job has changed, and how someone that may have been written off by the culture, if you will, of the fire service in the past might actually be one of your best employees that you have if you just invest in them a little bit, or looking at enhancing or changing, I should say, minimum requirements is a big one that I'm technically personally an advocate for. Now, that should not be mistaken with lowering them, but for us, at least in central Iowa, a lot of times we've been looking for a candidate that's previously certified, and you have to be previously certified to apply for a career position around here a lot of the time. And for many of us, what we did was we started as volunteers and got certified, and then you could just walk right in and apply for those jobs. But now those classes, you know how this goes, right?
Yes.
No, the classes aren't there.
So
they're not certified, so then they can't apply. And Taylor could come into our fire department and be the best applicant we've ever seen, but we're just going to say thanks but no thanks because she doesn't have firefighter 2, so to speak, or whatever the case might be. I mean, that's insane. So I think on that end of it, I think we need to think outside the box and think differently to try to draw people into it, because we can't be so quick to write people off.
Well, and along with that, so what you're talking about would definitely require some sort of an academy process for people to go through, right? Which isn't a bad thing. And you can create one and make it work. It takes a lot of time to perfect it, right? It's going to take years and years and years and years and years to perfect it. Yeah. But by doing that, then you can bring people on, and even if they don't have necessarily the skills to do it, you can start judging people by their drive, by their heart, by their passion, by their brains. if you get somebody who you can tell is excited, is driven into this, that they want to dig in and do it, and they will do anything for you, those are people you're going to want. And those are people that, they will work till the ends of the earth. I'm thinking the movie Rudy in my head right now, you know,
and you can't teach that, right?
You can't
teach.
You can't. And those people could be written off before, like you were talking about, if they didn't have those certifications. But if you took the leap to try to change what your department's doing in a way, right? Not change everything, but maybe change some of the onboarding process, you might be able to find more of those people. Yes, you're still going to get people who are certified applying too. It happens. It's going to be great because you're going to have best of both worlds then.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. I think it can be done. And it's a change, right?
And it's a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of hard work, but like I said, if we keep doing what we're doing, here we're going to be. And so, on the volunteer side of things, at least in Iowa, one thing that Iowa has done and is a pretty hot topic is a minimum training standard, right? Because in addition to all those things we've mentioned, but let's just say someone still does go join the local volunteer fire department, and now we're going to say you have to train this many hours. And a lot of people, some people that alienates them for whatever reason. It could be a multitude of things, but we've never asked more from first responders than we're asking now. And in terms of being trained in multiple areas and jacks of all trades, and then having to navigate that. That being said, I don't think you're ever going to hear me say we shouldn't be training consistently and thoroughly as first responders in a job that, frankly, that can be lethal should we make a mistake. So I am a fan of, or an advocate for minimum training standards, but I know that may not be the case for everyone. But it's a lot of variables there, and there's a lot of things going on. But I would tell you that there are things that I experienced in the volunteer fire service, particularly on the camaraderie side of things, on the community support side of things, on the overall approach to it that I experienced as a volunteer that I've never seen in a career fire station before. To this point in my life, there's great pride in what we did as volunteers. Doesn't mean we always did it right. Doesn't mean, but and I've always found that interesting. And that's something that I miss from the volunteer side of things. We hung out together. We did a lot of things together. We, our families knew each other. It was a lot of fun. And how you capture that and get that back is, and some places have it, some places don't, but I do miss that. And I experienced that a lot in the volunteer fire service, and as doing it for a career now, it's something that I've definitely tried to implement and institute, but that takes time as well, So
I'm going to pause you right there, because we're going to come back to that thought. But I want to jump back for a second about the requirements and training hours and things like that. Imagine, if you will, a volunteer department in kind of the middle of nowhere, field all around them, largest city is, I don't know how long away, like a long way away. Maybe they have 5 members who show up regularly, a total of 8 members on the department. They might have like 3 or 4 trucks, maybe. And those are probably from the 70s or 80s. And let's say they have 15 total calls a year. And they're all farmers. It's such a tough spot to be in with the training regulations and stuff, especially when it comes down to that small of a department, because how are you to tell them you have to train this much or you can't be a firefighter? And then what happens to this town? Exactly. It's like, what happens? They literally would not have anybody else. If we're not conscious and aware of those things you just described, what's going to happen is they're going to say, well, I can't do this anymore. In that volunteer department, that 8 goes down to 2 or 0 or worse. Could you imagine an entire department of 2 people? Oof. I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure it's there.
Ones that have closed their doors and stopped responding. Absolutely. To that, I would say this, Taylor. So, to me, it's all about risk, right? That's what we do. It's risk management per se, in a lot of ways. The biggest thing I would say there is, I think a lot of times people will take that on both sides of that argument, and they will say, well, if you don't do this minimum amount of training hours, you're not a firefighter.
Yeah.
Or if, or I was, and you're taking my firefighter title from me. No, to me, what the way I would phrase it is, if that's all so example, you're the department you're talking about, that's kind of isolated, smaller like that. Maybe they can't meet the so-called minimum training standard, but they can do half of it, or 3/4 or 2/3 or a quarter, whatever. But then the key then is to operate understanding that that's the capability of your team.
Mm-hmm.
So that group of 8 is neat, and this is not negative, this is the reality, is probably not trained or equipped to operate that they have 18 instead of 8.
Yeah.
Or it's a different environment. So to me, that's where it gets dangerous, is where you don't train, you don't train. And then you act like you have been training.
Yeah. That is exactly, there you go. Those are the words I was trying to find.
Yeah. So, and to everybody, that's different, right? That's part of being a team member, is knowing the capabilities of your team.
Mm-hmm.
And managing that.
Mm-hmm.
So not subjecting them to something that's unacceptable risk, and knowing that they're not trained or prepared for that, which again is not negative. That's just the reality of the situation. They can still be effective and be a firefighter. No one can take that from them,
mm-hmm.
per se. That's just kind of my opinion on that one.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to come back and hit that one a little bit.
That's a good one.
So let's go back. You started this. Let's go ahead and keep going. Kind of the differences between the volunteer career stuff that you miss or that you find different. Some it might not have to be like good versus bad or anything, but like, what are some key differences? What are things you had to get used to, or things you didn't expect to be different and that are?
Yeah. So as I look back to work, starting as a volunteer, I was in my low 20s at the time. And I would tell you, one of the things, now that I'm 41, I've said it twice now on recorded. So but I tell you, one of the things I remember, Taylor, was when I was 21. I remember, of course, I wasn't married at that time. I didn't have any kids at that time, and I could run 2 or 3 calls overnight. And then, because of the nature, whether it was summer and I wasn't in school, or I was a waiter for a while, I kind of had unorthodox hours. But my point is I didn't have to get up at 7 a.m. and then go work a full-time job as a 21-year-old, so to speak. And so that was something, as I've gotten older, that I have so much more respect for the officers of that department at that time, that were in their mid to late 30s, 40s, some in their 50s, and some older, that were still going to these calls. And we were actually, I would say, we were paid per call versus true volunteer, but it was a very small amount, of course, but paid per call. And then they'd go work. Some of these guys and gals are doing manual labor all day in the heat of the Midwestern summers, and
those are terrible.
Oh my God.
People just don't understand. They're like, it's so hot. Florida gets hotter. It's like, no, you don't understand. This is a humid heat. This is bad.
Yeah. It's rough. It's rough. And what it does, though, is if you're still running calls at that fire department, given that scenario, that means that you really care about being at that fire department. Right. So, that's something that I remember a lot from being younger. But I teach a couple classes. I've taught them around the state and around the region a little bit. And one of the things I ask in one of those classes is, how has the fire service changed for you during your time? So, and a lot of times I'll have younger people in those audiences, and some that are older towards the end of their career, some that have even retired. And I think back to the first fire engine I rode on. It was an open cab. It was, and I tell people all the time, and they kind of chuckle, and I do too, but at the same time, I'm actually very serious when I say it, is, with that open cab, you'd get up and there was a spring loaded bar there, And that was the
Mhm.
only thing that was keeping you from getting to the fire and falling off that truck, which could be a lethal thing.
Oh, I rode on one of those too.
Yep. Yep. I mean, and you get into safety cultures and seat belts and there are things that I did that looking back, I don't know if ashamed is the word, but sometimes it keeps me up at night because I didn't know any better.
Mhm.
And there are things that could be not wearing my air pack when I should have. Seatbelt usage probably wasn't appropriate a couple times. Again, I'm not proud of that, but that's full disclosure.
Everyone's done it. They don't want to admit it, but
Right.
it's everybody. So
I can remember very specific calls where that I almost got in trouble not doing some of those things. And I would say this, Taylor, one of the things that as for in the volunteer side of things that I distinctly remember too is, if you have a call at 1 p.m. on a Monday, who knows what you're going to get, because people have to make a living.
mhm.
You get that call at 7:15 on training night when there's 30 people at the fire station, and then you have that so-called model that everybody thinks you should have. The chief's in his car, the deputies in his car, the captains and lieutenants are on fire trucks, and the firefighters, and it's all very orderly. And that wasn't the case, right? It's not how it works. It's
No, I wish.
right. Whereas on the career side of the things, it typically is more regimented in that regard. But that's something that, as I look back, the reason I bring that up is some of those behaviors that I was that had really kind of been normalized in that culture. What I needed was a company officer to grab me by the collar and be like, "Kid, listen here. Like, this is not a joke. You can't do that. Here's why. Don't do that again. Sincerely, your captain."
Mhm.
But right. But that goes to show the importance of having strong leaders in those roles. I think that's the most influential role in the fire department, is the company officer.
I would agree with that. I really would. And sometimes on departments I've seen from across Nebraska, from across the states, sometimes, especially on these smaller volunteer departments, you get a lot of people in those spots. They're really good at decision making, stuff like that, but they're not great with the not mean or anything, but just the firm hand with people sometimes to just, hey, you got to do this. Like this is not an optional situation here. Like, you will be better for doing this. You have to do this to stay safe, to whatever. Get it done.
You're right.
So.
You're absolutely right. That's something that I've seen over the years too. And this is on both sides of or all classifications, whether it be volunteer career or whatever. It's amazing what firefighters will do for each other when it's time to respond to the emergency call. But a lot of them won't have the fortitude to do exactly what you just said. And this is not to say that it's easy to do.
No, it's not.
But, yeah, right. But those tough conversations can be difficult to have sometimes, and I would say that's a difference too between the volunteer and career side of things. Is volunteers, like, they're not getting paid for this, or it's very small. By today's standards, it basically fills the gas tank to get you there and back, and then that's all you get, if you want to put it in those terms. And so these are your friends. These are your community members.
You're going to have to do business with these people come 8 a.m. You're going, some people that, I mean, you could have a situation where a company officer is your employee at work and you're the firefighter. How does that dynamic change them when you go to work? Is it going to have ripple effects? Everyone, and for good reason, I understand it because I do it too. Everyone's so worried about what other people are going to think and if they're going to be okay, or if they're going to get their feelings hurt, or what if the one little thing you said to them, they're like, nope, I'm done with this department. And you really needed them on there,
You just hit a big one there. And that's something that I think we should pause on there. And that's a mistake I've made a lot in my life, is judging the quality or correctness of some of the things I've done based on what other people thought of me. And there's probably times where it wasn't conscious, and there are probably times where it was. What I've learned is that if you live your life based on what other people think of you, you're going to be kind of chasing the carrot, and before you know it, it's going to be gone. It's over.
Yeah.
And Frank Viscuso,
Mm-hmm.
saw him in April. He was here in Iowa, and I don't remember the exact way he worded it, but he essentially said, he talked about, you get used to the fact that people aren't going to always like everything you do as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's not happening, then that's called mediocrity. And nobody, I mean, if you're just sitting there trying to be everybody's friend and just, do that, you're not changing, you're not evolving, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's not doing complete justice to what he said. But I know
I have it written somewhere down in my
yeah,
notes. Like, I'm pretty sure I wrote it word
and,
for word because I know exactly what you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Step up and lead lecture, and it was gosh,
so good. I still haven't done a review episode on that one yet. I need to, because that was an amazing lecture to go sit in on.
Yeah,
it was fantastic.
He just commanded the room.
Oh man. And that's saying something too, because we saw it in two different places. Like probably a month or month and a half apart from each other.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait, what?
Right. I mean, that guy was good. He was good. And I'd seen his stuff in the written word, but I'd never seen him in person until then. And my goodness, he was great. The other thing he said was, he used the phrase, he said, "I'm not here for me, I'm here for we, and we are here for them."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, whoa, everybody in the room just like dropped their pen and looked up when they were like, whoa, I better write that one down. Yeah. It was like, yes, sir. That would be, yeah. But yeah. Well, I was going to tell you too, you talked about fire service libraries here recently.
Yes.
Libraries. And the book you identified, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Yes. Thank you.
That is one of my favorite books I've ever read in my life.
I love it. I need to read it again.
Oh my God. I mean, a couple of times you kind of shake your head like, I can't believe I just read that. But other times it's like, this is it made a lot of sense to me in terms of what he was trying to say.
It is. And it is a completely different book than I expected it to be when I bought it. Yeah. I bought it and I'm like, oh, this is going to be this type of book. And I'm starting to read the first chapter. I'm like, this is not the book I thought it was.
You're 100% right. I read that thing and I was like, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that one.
So you guys, it's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, expletive. Yeah, that's how you say that word.
Yeah, we'll call it expletive. Yeah.
By Mark Manson, right?
Mark Manson.
Yep. So if you guys are looking for that, I could have just told you just to go look at the Firehouse Libraries episode and go listen to the entire thing to find out. But oh well.
Yeah. That was a good book. I liked it.
Oh man. So other differences between volunteer and career that you've seen.
Yeah. So
and they don't have to be a ton by any means.
Yeah.
So
I mean those are the dynamic of the that's always been a really big thing for me that always surprised me, was the dynamic between what I would call almost like the community support feel of a volunteer agency that I haven't necessarily seen with the career stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, and granted, it is careers, you're getting paid for it, but it's almost expected from the community in a career setting. Whereas in the volunteer, personally, I've seen more just community rallying behind it.
Great word.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
And maybe it's because I see people in other jobs. I know these people. Maybe it's just the smaller communities, and that's because it is volunteers, so they are smaller communities, and maybe that's why. Whereas like the career are just so much larger. I don't know exactly why.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Another thing I guess I would add to as we're talking about that is, I'm going to say skill sets, but what I mean by that is not necessarily the adequacy of them, just the differences. For example, the big one for me was always pumping a fire truck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you want to know how to draft and run a water shuttle, you go to rural Iowa and rural Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
It is an art. And I look at some of the municipal guys, and that's what I am now. And
No clue.
What? Yeah. Same thing on the other side. We take municipal guys and you give them 80 pounds of pressure off a hydrant and they can throw water everywhere. So that's a big one I remember too, was learning, because of course when I started, we did a lot of rural stuff, and we have a small contingent now where I am, but that was another thing too. A lot of the technical, more advanced stuff on the career side has been a lot of fun to get involved with, in terms of some more specialty stuff, some of the more of the advanced extrications and things. So rope rescue, some confined space stuff, even some grain bin, even though obviously that's happening predominantly in the rural setting. I actually didn't do any of that training with that small volunteer department I was on at that time. I didn't get that until I went to the career departments. But a more specialized skill set, depending on what your environment is. I've noticed that's been a little bit different.
Oh, definitely. Because I mean, the only places I've seen anything go that deep, a lot of places have very, very basic levels of that training, but
which is okay.
But it's fine. I love it. I love that that's there. It's better than nothing. Fantastic. But sometimes you'll be able to find a department, one or two, that like maybe, okay, this department's really good at water rescue and they have a team of like 5 volunteers that do extra training, but you have to have those people that really want to do it and keep up on that training to make it work. Whereas on career departments, you get paid to do it. So they kind of, I don't know exactly how it works. So you get put on some of those teams, or if it's just per crew or how that works. I think every department is a little bit different how they do it, but you're getting paid to do it. So it's, it's your job. You're going to be committed to it because it's your job. So
you're making a living, right?
Yeah.
It made me think as you were talking about that there, that another thing I would add is how we form teams per se. So in the volunteer environment, we did a lot of voting.
Yes.
We did a lot of, I'm just going to be blunt. It was a lot of who it was a lot of voting. It was a lot of strategy to that. And some people, that was their jam. They wanted that power. They wanted that formal authority, which of course we know doesn't alone make a leader, the formal title, right? But whereas on the doing it for a living, you really had to justify yourself and prove, however you chose to do that, that you were the best option or candidate at that time. And that was a change. That was a change for me, because going into the career service, that was all I had known. Was I had one chief as a volunteer. He was repeatedly voted into that position. I trusted him. He was very good to me. There are other people that did not agree with his way of seeing the world. Understand that too, right?
Yep.
Welcome to life, right?
Yes.
But that was always interesting to me, is how the organizations are formed, and the teams within are formed, and who's making those choices and stuff. That's been a difference that I would say has been interesting too over the years.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me think of the application process for the career and stuff like that, especially when it comes to like interviews and things. I know with my husband, we went over and over and over, probably for 6 to 8 months on his questions, and just not memorizing, but getting him comfortable with what answers he wanted to give and stuff. Right. And really getting down to like why he wanted to do it, and like making sure it was like 100% him and 100% like what he wanted to say and convey and everything. And it's tough because there's plenty of firefighters. I'm sure plenty of firefighters, I don't know how long it took you to test to get into a department, right? People test and test and test and test, and they never get in. And sometimes they get dropped in the interview process, through that. And it sucks. But at the same time, that's how they're deciding to bring people on through that step. And if you want it good enough, we all love skills, right? We all love actual hands-on skills. Those are like our bread and butter. It's what we love spending time on. But it's important to make sure you're putting in that extra work where they're actually counting it towards too. It's kind of like with officer tests. I know that's a big notorious one that like they always go off the test, not off the skills or anything, right? And it sucks. I know it sucks, but then you got to just work extra hard to get that test part right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a better answer for that.
You're right. It's all part of it. I can remember over what you just said that watching officers getting voted in, and then going to my first test where it was a test and you had to perform on that test. And if you didn't make it, it's just like, too bad, so sad.
It's like, it doesn't matter how you do on the fire ground, how good you command, if you don't pass that test, whatever. And I know people have their problems with it, and I may get some hate on this, but if you really want it that badly, you still got to play by the game and do it.
It's all part of it.
Yeah,
it's all part of it. There's no doubt about it. And if there's a new and better way to do it, I would never say never, never say always in this line of work. Right? But at the same time, there is validity to a lot of those things. But I'm with you. I mean, it's going to be part of what if you're in that realm, it's going to be part of that. So you might as well prepare for that the best that you can.
Exactly. Sure. I mean, you care about it so much, you want it so much, so put in the work. And I don't know, I have to tell this to myself so many times, put in the work, suck it up, and just do it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. It's amazing. I've seen this, over the years, I'm sure you have too, in the fire service, that it's amazing how hard sometimes people work to get out of doing stuff instead of just being done with it. And that, and that's like in all realms of being in the fire station. We'll do that, but it is what it is. But back to what you said about applying all over, I did do that, and I applied. That's been a big change too over the years. When I started applying, would have been the mid 2000s, early 2000s, and applying for full-time employment, that is, and at that time, there was very little hiring going on. I remember walking into rooms and you'd be one of sometimes 100, sometimes 400 candidates, and they're hiring, they'd come in and there'd be 400 of you there and then say, we're going to hire 9 of you. And you'd look around this room and it's like, what are my odds here? Or, the first full-time job I had was in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and they hired 1 person.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And I think I want to say there was in the realm of 100 candidates. So you literally had a 1% chance. And this is why I go back to, and this is something that I'm very serious about. When people start to lose sight of what's important, I think it's important to remember where you've come from. And you should never, ever forget, in that circumstance, there are 99 other people in that room that wanted your job and they chose you. And don't let them down. You represent those 99 people, and the city's taking a chance on you. And when you're the volunteer and you're voted in as an officer, those families or those community members that you see every day, they're trusting you to make good choices with their loved one, because their loved one's going to do what you tell them to do.
Exactly.
And that's a big deal.
It's a lot of responsibility. And it puts a lot of weight on those officers. It really does. And it's something that, I mean, I've never been an officer. I can't say that for sure, but I've talked to plenty. My husband was one for a while. I know the weight it puts on people, and it's not fun. And you're never going to get the full scope of it until you do it. Right.
It's a big deal. And people need to just remember that when it's time to go to work, and that's, as long as your head's in the right spot there, I think you'll be okay. But that can be lost sometimes when things don't go our way, or we get lost in the dramatics of it all, or whatever it is. The stresses of life in general can distract us, and then that's when we're kind of vulnerable there. So lots to think about when you take that role.
I'll slip this in here really quick too. It's something I make sure with Chris when he's on shift. Now, if I'm having a bad day or something goes wrong with me or whatever it is, I don't tell him while he's on shift. Sure. If something really bad happened, okay, maybe I tell him. But if it's anything, even if it's a major crisis for me, if it's anything that can wait till the next day and not change, I'm not telling him anything. I am sucking it up and dealing with it, either finding somebody else to talk to or whatever I need figured out, right? Because those are extra things that he would be thinking about on shift, and is not safe at all.
That's a hard dynamic there.
It's tough.
It's tough to being the spouse and exactly what you're running things at home. You got all these stressors too.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have those acute ones that they see there. And yeah, that's hard to do. And those are things that they have to be addressed and talked about at some point, but
Oh,
having
yeah.
the fortitude to try to, shield him in this case from that, man, that takes a strong woman like you to do that, because that is hard to do. And that was something that I would say too, Taylor, that I learned. My dad over the years, I go back to my dad a lot as I think about the way he lived his life as a deputy. He never brought work home with him,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that he projected it onto us as children. I know he and my mom now as an adult that they had conversations behind closed doors, probably relating about work. I mean, you have to talk about that at some point, right?
Yeah.
You know how it works. But being able to understand that in this case that he's at work, and that you try to keep those things off his plate until he's done with work. That's tough to do, and it says a lot about you and your strength to be able to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't think of it that way at all. It doesn't feel very strong at all, but I would just hate for something to happen, for him to miss something, or to just have just enough of the weight of whatever stress it is in his head,
Mm-hmm.
and have that throw him off his game in any sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
Because dominoes can fall very quickly. I know that. I've seen it at times, where somebody's not in the right mindset, and granted, it's never been anything bad, but it could have been if someone hadn't intervened on it,
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of little things that can go wrong on a fire ground that'll change everything. And if we can just stop that extra stress happening, that is why caring for the families when it comes to the fire service, volunteer career, whatever realm you're in, if your career, yes, it's a job, but you still need to care about the families, because they affect your firefighter, and your firefighter affects how everything goes on the job. Same with volunteer. If they're having a really bad day and a call drops, oh man, that firefighter's not in their right mind. They are not.
Yep. Yeah. You're right. It is a family endeavor when someone goes down this line of service, and it's the whole family's got to be there, and that's hard. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. So we will get into family here in a little bit. I'm going to keep us moving on, because
absolutely.
We keep going down rabbit trails, which I absolutely love, but we gotta at some point hit a few of these things. We're gonna go into now, because we're about an hour in, and we haven't even talked about your podcast yet.
That's okay. That's fine.
So I want to talk about the Iowa Fire Flyer podcast.
Yeah.
I saw this. I'm like, wait, what? Yeah. And I'm reading into it. I'm like, this is interesting. I started listening to some episodes. I'm like, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
So you somehow managed to put firefighting and flying planes, what do you call it? Oh my goodness, words escape me.
Kind of tying
aviation. There we go. Aviation.
Yeah.
Into one podcast, but it works.
Yeah. So, everybody has their things that kind of make them tick, and as I look at my life, but it's pretty straightforward. For me, certainly my family is at the top. My personal faith beliefs are up there too. And to everybody that's different, some that's organized religion, some it's not, it doesn't really matter. But I do think that when we get into the mental health aspect of the job and coping and managing, that a faith belief is important. And then for me, of course, is the firefighting job. And then fourth is I absolutely love airplanes and all things aviation. And that's just, I always have. So I decided in my mid 30s that it was either now or never. And at that time I was working as a lieutenant at a different department, and working at 24 hours on and 48 hours off shift. So it really facilitated going to work. For 24 hours. And then my wife would be at work, my kids would be in school, and then I would go take flying lessons and ended up getting my private pilot's license. And so, this firefighting and that and aviation, I could sit there and talk about this for hours. Right? But
technically you have.
Yeah, true. Valid point. Valid point. I same old story. Things happen in life. You remember right where you were.
Mhm.
I had actually gone to Iowa City, Iowa, to watch the Iowa Hawkeyes play the Iowa State Cyclones, and I was driving home, and I'd never listened to podcasts before. I didn't know a whole heck of a lot about them, but it's about a 2-hour drive, give or take, from where I lived to Iowa City, and they'd played in Iowa City that year. And it was not a close game. It was Iowa destroyed them, and it was just kind of like, man, I got to drive back 2 hours. So I'm driving home. Well, let's try this podcast thing. So I actually searched an aviation topic, and up came a podcast called Aviator Cast, which was made by a gentleman that lives in Alaska and does a really good job. And that was the first podcast episode I ever listened to. And then that opened the door to podcasts. And then I found all kinds of others, podcasts like yours, podcasts in the fire service, podcasts and the aviation side of things. And a lot of those had very profound impacts on me. It was always amazing to me how you would be in a position in your life, and then for somehow, some way, that episode would come up.
I don't know how it happens, but it happens all the time. All the time.
It's like they read your mind, right?
Totally. I was just listening to another one by Jeremy Sanders that he put out on First Culture, and I'm like, this one was meant for me right now. What?
It's like they're talking to you directly.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So I had several of those experiences, and I listened to, I got into some health podcasts, really just some different ones that were just fascinating to me. And I thought, you know what, other people made their podcasts and it had an impact on me. It's time to kind of pay it forward a little bit. So as you think about what you're going to talk about, well, what are the two things that would be podcast worthy that I'm passionate about? One, the fire department. One's let's call it all things aviation. So I wanted to make mine a little bit different. And so what I decided to do was use a format where I would do one episode about a fire service topic, and then I would alternate and do an episode on an aviation based topic. And there are a lot of similarities between the two worlds, believe it or not, particularly as it relates to teams, leadership, crew resource management. Those are things we could go on for hours about as well. But there are a lot of similarities there, and that led to trying it out. Ended up launching a website, and I had to learn all of this. I'm watching you work your tech over there, and I'm thinking, man, it took me like 3 months to figure out what you just did in 30 seconds, right? But I got a boom mic here. I've got it right behind my computer here, and so I had to learn it all from scratch, right? But it's amazing what Google can teach you.
Oh, Google, YouTube. That's how I learned most everything is YouTube.
Yep. And so that's kind of how it all came together. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, and what I like about the podcast is the different episodes, the fact that it switches back and forth, right? You have the option, if you really just want to listen to fire stuff, you can just skip the other ones. But I find myself listening probably more intently on the aviation ones, on the flyer episodes, just because I'm like, what? Like, this is all new to me. This is really cool and interesting. And it's getting me into something else I never thought I would be interested in. Like, this is kind of cool, you know? So it really helps people find something different, you know? And a long time ago, I think it was last fall, I put out an episode about changing your algorithm and stuff like that. And when I listened to the Flyer podcast, it's like, oh, it's working. I'm changing it. I'm changing what I'm putting into my brain, right? Like, this is fun. It's something very different. You just get stuck in those ruts sometimes, and you need to just change it up.
You do. Change is good. Change
is really good.
You got it. So, with everything that's going on in the world, I haven't been able to be as active with it lately as I wanted to, but it kind of goes back to some things we talked about before, but if you want it, you got to go get it. And that was one thing that really, I enjoyed about your setup, is that you produce, you do this, and you're committed to it, and it's a priority.
Except for last week, I missed 1 week.
But yeah, think of the whole scheme of things though. 1 week, I think you're allowed to have 1 week,
I know.
right? But yeah, and I've learned that you have to manage that, and that's a work in progress for me. But nonetheless, it's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot along the way. So yeah,
That's awesome. So how do you pick out what episodes you do, like your topics and stuff for it?
Well, there's a couple that were kind of spur of the moment, kind of like you've done a couple times.
Those are the best.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, because you get like really fired up about it too. You're like, oh, I got a bunch for this. We're good.
Yeah. So so what I did before I started the podcast, I just made a laundry list of 10 or 12 topics to start. So I had something, but as far as the aviation side of it, I pretty much kept to that. But the fire side of things, there were two that really popped up that were spur of the moment. That's like, oh man, I'm just going to mic drop this here.
Yeah.
And you can use the analytics on the backside of things to see who's listening to it. And these were by far my two biggest ones. And one was smoothbore versus a fog nozzle.
Yep.
And then the other one was, can you push fire? And that was I
haven't listened to that one yet.
You have to let me know what you think of that one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. Because I try to. My undergraduate degree is in physics. I'm a physics guy, so I like.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I'm the kind of the it's right or wrong. It's yes or no. There's no gray area. That's kind of how my mind works. So when you tell me, not you, but anybody for that, if they were to say I can push fire, I had fire pushed on me, and my response would be, well, prove it to me. Show me it can be done. And there's so much out there now from UL and NIST that I have an opinion on that now. And yeah, so I talked about that. That was a big one. That might
be tomorrow while I'm working. Because I need to have one for the start of my day anyways. So I think that's gonna be top of my list.
Yeah. Let me know. I don't think I made anybody too mad, because pretty much everything I talked about I cited more or less.
I've started to figure out you just can't you can't think about it. You're gonna make people mad. And like an episode that you don't think is gonna make anybody mad is gonna make everybody mad. And like what I mean, you just gotta start living with it.
Yep. But those were fun to make.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So future of it, where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah. So for me, I would, like to continue on in that format. I have seen, with my base in terms of what I do for a living right now in the fire service, those have had a larger following. So like there are so many things going on in the industry now that are prevalent and that need to be discussed. Things like mental health, things like cancer awareness, things about I got some questions the other day talking to one of our other staff members about the advanced education. Is it worth it? Does that make the firefighter? Of course I have an opinion on all that stuff, but there are issues, right? Safety, and all of those sorts of things. As far as the aviation side of things, I've started moving into some different realms of training, specifically instrument training. So you're flying in clouds where you can't see the ground per se, and that's an art.
Huh. Okay.
And it's pretty crazy stuff. But I do a lot of flight simulation too here in my house. I have a desktop computer that I do that on, and I think that's worth talking about too. So, definitely looking to keep it moving, and I usually like to do 1 or 2 episodes a month. If I could do more, I would, but unfortunately that just hasn't materialized at this point, but certainly looking to keep it going. And just like I said before, the episodes that I came across really had profound impacts on me. We kind of joked about it, but at the same time, there was a couple times that I was in a spot in my life where I really needed a pick me up, and they provided those. And I believe it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not be a week from now, but someday somebody's going to come across one of those, and they're going to hear something that hopefully gets them back on track. That's really the goal with it, and I hope that is the case for somebody out there someday.
That is amazing. I know with this podcast, I've heard a few stories from people of specific episodes of ones I've had with guests that they've been able to reach out to them with maybe similar problems and actually get a lot of help on. And that was amazing to hear. I know another episode I did last fall, somewhere around there, about talking about, taking a needed break. I did an episode with Robbie Owens about that. And somebody listened to that, a chief, and he was able to actually take the time to talk to one of his members who he thought was just not showing up just because he didn't want to, found out he had a lot going on in his life and could actually then help the guy, and not kick him off the department unneededly, right? They were able to actually like put together a whole leave of absence policy for it and everything. Like hearing those stories to save a firefighter from getting kicked off a department where that may be one thing that they really needed in their life to be stable. And just hearing that somehow something we said worked, or made them think about it, made them think to reach out to this person and not just assume things. Oh man, it hits you different.
It does.
It does. And I'm sure there's tons of stuff, like I'm sure yours has already impacted somebody, they just haven't told you yet, because that happens plenty too. It's, you never know when it's going to hit somebody.
You never know. And you're right. Firefighters are it's in their character to try to, a lot of the time, to try to keep it all in and hide it and not show weakness. And it's just that one person.
Yeah.
You never know what somebody else is going through. And even people show things in different ways, right? They react in different ways, and you never know what's going on. And that is something that in the fire service today that makes me it's very sad. It's a lot of things. It's very sad in that sometimes firefighters feel like they have no option and drastic things, and that's sad, and I hate to see that. So we got to do everything we can to try to reach out when people need a lift, and be a brother, be a sister, and do the right thing and help them out. Right. And it's not always like you said, it's not always because they're showing up just wanting to be a pain in your rear today. They really got some stuff going on, and let's be humans here and help them.
Exactly. Some people, like you said, some people react to things differently. So some people, if they have something big going on that they're sad about, they may lash out and be angry, or they may be more distant, or maybe they're going to be even happier than normal. But something's off, like they're fake happy, they're.
Yep, I know exactly what you mean.
And everybody's just so different. And some people may just be grumpy. But
sometimes they are.
Sometimes they are. But like it's especially those sudden changes. But even then, it can happen over time and without you noticing and stuff like that. And so just, I don't know. It's so hard for people to talk about emotions. It's hard for me to talk about emotions. I talk about it a lot on here, but honestly, when I talk about it, I'm usually doing the solo episodes and I'm alone, and so I could just talk, and I know people are going to listen to this later, but I don't have to like worry about anyone judging me face to face or anything. It's so much harder to talk about emotions when you're sitting next to somebody at the station.
Right.
It's tough. I get it. It's just,
it's going to take that the culture doesn't usually see.
Yeah.
Right. And so anytime that happens, there's people are uncomfortable per se. But that doesn't mean they're not human. Doesn't mean they've got to vent a little bit too, and that's a big deal right now, with the mental well-being of people. And that's something that I think we're going to continue to learn about and have to adapt and change, because certainly the idea of holding it all in per se is not the answer.
I would say a quick little tidbit to look out for, and this is just because I do it personally, and I know some other people personally that do it too, is if you ask if somebody's okay or something, whatever, and they give you a short answer and they get really quiet, they're thinking of all the things they want to say, but they are too uncomfortable to say.
Yep. What they want, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
If someone tells you about their entire day going on, okay, they might be fine.
Probably doing okay.
Probably doing okay. Maybe not. I won't judge that far, but probably doing okay. But if they say something shorter, even if they don't talk very much anyways or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're completely silent after that, they're thinking about all the things that they want to tell you that's running through their brain of things that are bugging them or whatever that they do not feel comfortable saying either in that moment or to you or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, you're going to have to figure out a time to talk to them about it or have them talk to somebody about it, but that's something to look out for.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And unfortunately, some of the more tragic endings to some of these, we've people were displaying those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so as firefighters, as supervisors, as friends, it's important that we are aware of those things. And so when someone is doing some things they don't normally do, or they're clearly withholding something,
Mm-hmm.
we need to help each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes the station isn't the right place to do it, but
Right.
sometimes you just need to pull them away from that. And I hate saying it, but I'm okay saying it because I know you need to. Sometimes it's okay if they're displaying the stuff at the beginning of training. Okay, take them out of training and go somewhere else.
Yep.
That takes priority over anything fire service, because if you don't have them there at all, I mean, they're not going to be there.
Have you read any of this stuff by a gentleman named Rick George? Do you know Rick George?
I've heard of the name. I'm writing it down though.
RICJORGE is how he spells it.
Okay.
And so Rick George does a lot of stuff on resilience and training. And it made me think of it as you were talking there. I remember earlier on in my career, if you weren't getting something as a firefighter and in the training environment, whether it be the SCBA confidence course or climbing the aerial or having a mask over your face, the answer was always just push harder. If you give up, you're weak. Go, 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 go. And that's how it was. What he does is he talks a lot about that's not the answer. And it's a slow, and you get to a threshold where that's good for today. You need to back off.
Mm-hmm.
And the next time, maybe a little bit more. And he talks about building somebody up and throwing them in a darkened room with sound effects and stress overload and screaming at them is not the answer. His name's Rick George. And a good friend of mine was at a point in his career where there were some things going on and some things were affecting him differently than they had in the past. And he came across Rick George's stuff. And he actually emailed Rick George. So this guy, he's writing for fire engineering. I believe it's fire engineering. He's speaking at FDIC. This is a big name.
Mm-hmm.
And he emails Rick George. Within an hour or two, he emails him back, gives him his personal cell phone number. And my friend from suburban Des Moines, Iowa, calls Rick George. He's in Florida. And he talked for 2 hours. And my buddy came back to me and he said, you would have thought he knew me my whole life. He's like, you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's okay. This is okay. This is what's happening. And he explained it to him.
I love people like that. That is the fire service. That's the brotherhood I love about this profession. It's amazing. And you find people like that everywhere.
Mm-hmm. You really do. You really do. And I actually crossed paths with him at FDIC last August. Not this the most recent one, but the one before. They had done it in August because of COVID and things. And he doesn't know me from Adam, so to speak, right? But I know he is. And I walk up to him and I said, Mr. George, my name is Lance Routson. I'm from Iowa. I had a coworker and just spoken. I mean, to respect the privacy, right? I spoke to very generic terms. I just said, I just want you to know you made a difference here in this case. And he shook my hand, he hugged me, he gave me a challenge coin, his business card with his phone number on it. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. We keep talking about all this forever. Okay.
So sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is amazing. This just means that you have to come on again to talk about more stuff.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're just going to keep going. And this is going to end up being a 3-hour podcast at some point. Yeah. So and you know what? I'm sure I think the longest one I've ever done was 2.5 hours. That's right. it was a good one, but it was a long one.
Yeah, a long time though. Yeah.
All right. So if you're good with it, I think we're going to move on to the family firefighter survival
Yeah,
section.
absolutely.
Okay. So for those of you who are new to the show, new listening, this is a section of the show I love having for every guest episode I do. And I haven't had a guest on for a little while, and I've been very much missing these segments because these get fun. We're going to go as deep as we want to go with this.
Sure.
This section is never scripted except for maybe one. I have like one or two prompt questions to get us talking if we get stuck, but we haven't talked about any of this beforehand. So I don't know where we're going to go. Lance has no idea where we're going to go. It's going to go where we feel like it. But this section, make sure that it's named Family Firefighter Survival because family comes first, comes before firefighter, right? We need to make sure that we are doing what we can for our family. Like we've already talked about in the episode, you need to make sure your family is on a good page to have to succeed in this profession, whether you're a career or volunteer. And this is going to go over maybe some things we've gone through or our thoughts on things or ways we make it work or ways that like it definitely did not work. So don't do this, whatever we get into. So long roundabout way. I really need to like make up like a standard. Okay, here's this section, easy peasy. I feel like I just kind of like, oh, here's everything I can think about for the subject. So someday I will get that professional no, I won't. Who am I kidding? That's not me. That is not me. If somebody thought I was professional by listening to this by now, they'd like, no. Okay.
I think you're professional, Taylor.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Lance. So let's start out. Tell me a bit about your family. Tell us a bit about your family.
Yeah. So I'm married with 3 kids. So my wife is a working professional. She works, she's spent several years working in the healthcare industry and administration there, and recently went through a change and is now in insurance and benefits and does that sort of thing. And then I've got a 10-year-old daughter. I've got an 8-year-old son, and then our youngest daughter she's 4.5, close to 5 now. So next year will be the only year, as in next school year, that they will all be in the same elementary school together, which will be good.
Yeah, it'll be great. You want to run all over town?
Yeah, right. But that is something that I tell people all the time. It might sound kind of comical, but that's not my intent. I'm actually very serious about it. As I look back over my career, there were really 2 times where I noticed a change in myself. Number 1 was when I got married, and number 2 was when we had our first child. And the reason is because up until that point, full disclosure, the things I was doing, I didn't think about the ramifications that would have on someone that's counting on me to come back home and be there.
Well, when you started, you were single, right? Yeah.
Single in my low 20s.
And it makes sense because you aren't thinking about being married. You aren't thinking about family stuff when you first get into it. So you get into your habits. You
do. And there's a sense of, I'm not going to say being reckless or unsafe, but there's not as much. I didn't really have any hesitancy in doing a lot of the things I was doing. And that changed for me. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen to everybody, but it did for me. And there was a time where I had to be okay with not always being, changing my mindset, and that I do need to make a good choice here because I have obligations that I need to be aware of. But kind of as we mentioned before, the firefighting gig, and again, it has nothing to do with your status, whether volunteer paid or anything in between. It is a family endeavor. I believe that, and it is a support network endeavor. So whoever supports you or is in your networks per se, it affects them all. And the older I get, the more it pains me to walk away from them. At times, and the things that you miss, and being at peace with that is hard. It's hard, and sometimes I don't get it right. But when you are a public servant and you serve your community, when they call, you answer. And sometimes it's not at the most convenient time for you. So as in terms of your personal family life, and many of us, myself included, like I said, I've made mistakes over the years. I wish I could have changed, could go back and change, but it is a constant work in progress, and making that work with my wife and kids, and finding a way to make it manageable for everybody, and keeping in mind the stresses that puts on everything, for sure.
And remind me, what schedule was it? Was it 24/48?
So yeah, so I was on 24/48, and now I'm on a more or less an 8 to 5. Monday
Okay.
through Friday,
When
which
did that switch?
so
Exactly.
that switched 2.5 or 3 years ago when I took the job
Okay.
that I'm in now. Yeah, I was a lieutenant for many years, and then took a deputy chief's job, which became a Monday through Friday position. And interestingly enough, a lot of people will say, and my wife would tell you too, she'd say, a lot of people, oh, that must be great. Now you're on 8 to 5, so everything must be so much easier. And she's like, no, 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 no. I mean, it's give and take, right? Because I did a lot of things. I went to the grocery store. I did the laundry. This is not to say that
Yeah.
I did, but there's a lot of things that got done in my 48 hours.
I'm starting to realize that with Chris now, like, and I will not complain, but he's like, it was always my deal to do the dishes and he would do other stuff, right? Like that was the way it worked when he was mechanic. Now he's doing the shifts, and like I'm at work for my job and he's doing the dishes while I'm at work. And I'm like, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that, doctor's appointments and things like that. You just do those and nobody else is around. And now you can't do that anymore. But you're sleeping in your house every night, and you can go to a lot of the games and concerts and stuff now. So it's give and take. It's give and take there, for sure.
Oh man. So how did the kids adjust to the switch?
Yeah. They were really, they're, young little kids are pretty resilient, and they are, again, for the first several years of their lives, that was all that they knew, was every time that was gone. The first couple of weeks, it's kind of like, oh, he's actually home every night now. And then it just became a kind of an afterthought, but I will tell you, the time as it relates to my family where I knew I was pressing it too hard, and I was burning the candle at both ends, so to speak, was, I was working the 24/48. We'd had our second child at that time, and he's our son, and he was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I was actually working part-time too as a 911 dispatcher.
Okay.
And and so I would do that on the weekends when I wasn't on the 24. And I was walking out of to go. I still remember it was a cloudy day. It was either January or February. It was cold outside. And I was walking to the front door, and he grabbed me and he said, "Daddy, why are you always gone all the time?"
Oh,
And I
goodness.
was like, oh my, I mean, talk about just ripping your heart out. But yeah, but I mean, for a little 4-year-old to come up and tell you that, it's like, if there's anything that's ever going to get your attention, if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And so I went in and went to my supervisor and said, hey, like I can't do this anymore. And that was when I chose to end that side of my life. But kids will be very honest with you, and there are, you try to minimize those things that you miss, and you try to plan the best that you can. I think that now they understand what I've chosen to do with my working life, and sometimes it's convenient and sometimes it's not, but they understand I've tried to convey to them, if I leave, why I'm leaving, and that it's because somebody needs help right now and it can't wait. And that's what I do.
So do you get called out after work hours quite a bit, or like, I guess overall, like, is there like a simple way to kind of explain how that works with your job?
They're really, the best way I would describe it is I don't know if anything in the fire service is ever routine, but I would say the more routine calls, I do not typically respond with our department. It would be something of magnitude, like a working structure fire.
More of an all call that they need as many people.
More or less. Yeah. So I do respond to those at all hours, if we want to put it in those terms, should those come. But I think last month we just talked about this in a administration meeting today. I think we had 4 working structure fires last month. So that's 4 instances. And I think one of those might have happened when I was actually on duty between the hours of 8 and 5, let's say. So maybe 3 times last month I ran out of the house.
Yeah. And it's just still not, it's not anything that's normal to them because you're not on the volunteer department right now. So you're not doing that all the time. So they're not used to it. I mean, if it only happens 3 times a month, it's enough for them to notice, but it's not enough for them to get used to it either.
Yeah. A lot of times it just depends on what's going on, at the time. Because if nobody's worried about anything, they're not doing anything, they don't even care anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, have fun.
Yeah.
The minute you try to do something special or you're going out as a family or like whatever it is, and it's like, oh.
But the art of being able to turn it off, so to speak, is important. And that's something that I have struggled with almost my entire career, is being able to say that, I'm stepping away for a little bit of time here. And I'm not on duty right now. And allowing and being okay with the other members of the department telling you it's okay, we've got it. It's gonna, show goes on, it'll be fine. Those were things I struggled with for a long time and still probably do in some ways.
Oh yeah, I see a lot of people on the volunteer side having a very hard time with that because the call could come in at any time and you're always worrying about staffing. Like, are people in town this weekend or are they all on vacation? Like, do you have all your officers in town or is there only one left? And what's going to happen if the biggest call of the year happens and let's say chief, assistant chief, couple captains are gone. You got the one captain that maybe is kind of new in town or like new in that position. And like, he's doing fine, but like, you're still a little worried.
Why do you think people are that way? Why do you think why do you think they're so scared? I don't know if scared is the word. That's probably not fair. Why are they so reluctant to kind of let go and step away and let it be? The term I've heard the past few years is the fear of missing out. Have you heard this?
Oh, definitely. I think that's part of it. For me, definitely that's part of it. I think the other part is, what your abilities are, what you can handle. And even though the rest of your team, you're not ever for sure what everyone else can handle. You don't know their brains well enough. And it's just, if something comes in, you will be able to figure out how to handle it. And you don't necessarily trust everybody else that they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Kind of a harsh reality for me to say out loud.
Well,
but yeah,
it's hard to, it's in your nature. It's in your blood. Like I get it.
It's almost like, okay, do I trust Chris to go to the grocery store and get the right kind of pasta sauce? Like he's probably gonna come home with a pasta sauce. It's probably gonna be just fine, but it's probably not the one I would have said.
Not the one that you would. Yeah.
How many of us take a picture or car parts or certain type of engine oil or whatever it is? You take a picture of the bottle, right? You send it over to whoever needs to get it. You're like, you put out specific instructions in the text. You get this, you make sure you get this many liters of it, blah, blah. Awesome. Yeah. Right? Like, it's that specific because you don't necessarily trust them to get it right.
I know exactly what you mean. This sounds like my life every day.
Exactly.
My wife will send me pictures. Get this, not that. Don't screw it up.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's kind of what I equate it to is like, yeah, you trust them, you love them, you're with them all the time and stuff, but you don't really trust them either.
Oh man.
And that just takes more training and stuff behind it. But I think that's the best way to explain it though, is just like, having your significant other go shopping for you is a nightmare.
Good luck. Yeah. Good luck. That's funny.
So what do you think is behind it?
I think there is a fear of missing out. I can't even tell you where. I think it was a book or something I saw that a couple of years ago. I came across that because as I sit here and think about what my emotional response is you don't want to miss anything. Or another way I talk to my wife about this sometimes, and like it or not, the fact of the matter is that the structure fire by today's standards is a low frequency event.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell her, I would say, think about what you do every day and think about training your entire life, years worth of time to do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it rarely happens, and it happens in unpredictable times. And then say you're a CPA or something, and tax season comes along only once every, 3 times a month for 3 hours at a time in unpredictable fashion, but you've trained for 12 years of your life to do tax returns. And then what happens and you miss it and you can't go back, you can't. And I trying to explain that. I think for me is there's a desire as a public servant to want to execute the skills that you have spent years trying to become good at, or part of your craft, and be there for the public when they need you right then, right now, and execute and show them that you're there for them, and what they pay for or what they count on, however you want to phrase that, is there for them. And then you miss that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and that was always something that was hard for me to digest. But I know there are other people that are like, I'm off duty, see you, man, later.
Yeah,
and that's how they are,
Well, and with that fear of missing out, just you're right, a lot of it's for the public too, but there's plenty of it there that, like, okay, they're going to be talking about this fire for however long, they're going to get great bonding time over this, you just all of that chemistry that happens along with it by doing hard work together as a team. You're missing out on that. I absolutely, and it's the same thing. I hate it when I'm out of town and a call goes out and I know it's a good one, and I'm like, I want to drive back, it's a 2-hour drive back to town, but I really want to, like, it's still probably gonna be going by the time I'm back, but I can't leave, hanging out with family or whatever we're doing, like, but it eats at you so much because you're missing out on all of that, and you're not going to be included. I think that's a lot. Yeah, you're not going to be included in the group anymore. Yeah, not for that fire.
I think it is. Yeah, and you're gonna tell stories about that fire when you retire or leave the fire. This is what I tell people all the time. Or, we're going to tell stories about this when we retire. And if you miss something of that magnitude, you can't go back, and you can't. At the same time, the way I try to write that in my mind is remember, Lance, this event that you're talking about, so to speak, that was somebody's worst day.
Yeah.
Right. And it shouldn't, it's not a celebration when we have a fire. It's not at all. And I've seen people do that in the industry over the years, and that really bothers me. They'll come back and they'll almost celebrate the fact that they got a fire. I view it differently in that, I think there's a degree of, when we all return from a fire and we hope everybody's safe, both the public and our folks, there's a degree of success that should be recognized in that moment, given the fact that you just went to something that was dangerous. At the same time, it's not a celebration. And that's just my opinion on that. But nonetheless, as a working person, that you want to, whether it's your volunteer community that you serve and protect, or you're paid to do it, you want to execute on your skill set.
Yeah. It's such a hard feeling to explain to people, and I find myself trying to explain to friends and to just other people I've met, the feeling that you get, and the fact that yes, you are excited and you're happy to be there, but it's not the happy that you see somebody losing their house, right? It's so hard to explain it. And I don't know if anyone's ever actually done it correctly yet, and it's exactly that. You don't want to see this happen to people, but you're so excited to be there because you get a chance to do this. It is and I haven't found a way that equates to other professions yet.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to some people are, if you will, meant to do this, and some people aren't, and that's okay. Yeah. Yeah, for those that aren't or aren't interested, it's hard for them to understand that line of thinking, for sure.
So, goodness. Okay, so with family stuff, is there anything you do with your family now that to help you reset or to help you just relax when you're home? Or I don't know, what are fun things you do?
Yeah. So our kids are really active in sports right now, and school activities. And when those things happen, the pagers are off, the cell phones are off. I try to make it a point to very much detach. So to the extent that I can responsibly can from that world.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many people these days that won't put cell phones down, or won't get away from computers, or won't put social media down enough. And I'll go out in public and I'll see kids pulling on their parents' pant legs, and the parents don't look at them. And it's just, oh my gosh, like I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to be a priority. So we do, I take my son fishing a lot. He just loves. I was never a big outdoorsman, and I don't consider myself one now, but for some reason he loves it. So we go fishing a lot. Like I said, they're doing sports. Our daughter's gotten into some musical things at school. My daughters, have you heard of these escape rooms that are out there?
I want to do one so bad. I haven't done it yet.
Oh my gosh, they're great. I love them, and our oldest daughter just thinks they're the greatest thing ever, and I do too. And I do them with her. So we've been doing those lately. That's a lot of fun. Well, I'll travel a little bit. I'm a big Chicago Bears guy, so I'll go watch the Bears once a year. That's a big weekend that just my wife and I will go to Chicago and
Mm-hmm.
and stay in Naperville, and just that's important too with this dynamic is having that alone time just as adults, where the kids, you can separate from the kids a little bit. I think that's important too, because that relationship often gets lost when little ones are require your attention. But just the basics, and making the basics a priority, playing outside in the backyard, playing in the dirt, messing around, having some fun,
Nobody says an answer like that anymore. No one says the basic. No one talks about playing in the dirt.
Yeah.
Except for my husband. He talks about it all the time. But
right. We're just overgrown children.
Yeah. But like nobody says answers like that. They do more extravagant outings or things like that, but it's that genuine quality time.
It is. And I think that the way society is now, you can't, if you will, you can't buy those moments.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with flashy stuff. It has everything to do with letting in this case your child know that they're the priority right now. I'm not an overly emotional guy. I have my moments, but I tell my children I love them a lot. And I that's something that I take very seriously, so they know that, should something happen to me or anybody else, and work related or not, I think it's important that your kids hear that,
Mm-hmm.
And your spouse hears that, and those are the things that I try to focus on to help manage the dynamics of this type of career.
Mm-hmm. I know. So my husband's very lucky on his department. They don't have any mandatory overtime or anything. It's been very good. People are really good about stepping up and taking the overtime. Wow. It's fantastic. But he's had options, plenty of times to take overtime. And it's nice though, because at least right now, I've had a hard time kind of switching into this. It's been a little difficult sometimes. So there was a certain instance where he had the choice where he could take overtime one day, but he knew I was going through a harder spot. Mm-hmm. And he could have, and overtime is good money. It is. We all know it. It's good money. It can help pay for a lot of things, but there are times when your family just needs you instead. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there might be other times he can probably take as much overtime as he wants. It's going to ebb and flow just like life does. But you just need to prioritize that time. And we didn't do anything crazy when he was at home. We just hung out with each other, doing the basic stuff. But it was what we needed at the time.
I have made that mistake more times than I want to admit. Mm-hmm. And I'm not proud of that, but that is the truth. And you could not be more correct when you say that there are times where you just, now is not the time. You need to go. And I wish I had seen that more clearly at those times, but learning moments nonetheless. And you're absolutely right.
Hindsight's 2020, as it always is. I mean,
Yep.
if we could all go back and fix all the mistakes that we've made,
Oh,
if I could go back in the past 6 months, if I could go back in the past year and a half, 2 years of all the mistakes I've made, I've had a very different life by now. Like it would look completely different than it does right now.
Yeah.
But I'm happy where I'm at right now still. Those mistakes, they happen and it sucks. It really sucks. But they happen. I believe everything happens for a reason. That is just kind of my goal belief there. And you made those mistakes, but either it was to learn something about it later, or to maybe have a fight, or to whatever it is, to then set you up for the future wherever you're at now.
Yep.
So
the show goes on, as I say, and
yeah,
you're right. You everything happens for a reason. I'm a huge believer in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I have a book right over there in my library that's literally called "Everything Happens for a Reason."
Who's that one by?
Yeah, I don't remember. I read it years ago, but
I'm still writing down the title of the book. But
I'll show it to you. When we're off the air, I'll grab it to you, and
all right, perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to touch on the family stuff by chance?
I would just wrap it up with saying, remember that that's a priority, and it's, and in my opinion, that it's always number one. And that is, as long as we keep our priorities straight, both at the volunteer and career side of things, we should be in a good spot. And it's easy to lose sight of that sometimes. So remembering that that's number one is important. And in the end, I think it will help you be better at your job as a firefighter in your community in whatever capacity that might be.
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
And it's a work in progress.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
If you think you have it perfect, you don't have it right yet.
Nope. Guess again.
Exactly.
Yep.
This has been amazing. And yeah, we did not get to some of the topics I want to touch on tonight, so we have to get you back on for another one.
Sounds me. Yeah, we'll do it again. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So for people to find you, how do they do that?
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm not all over the social media world, but I do have a couple places where you can find me. I have a Facebook page at Iowa Fire Flyer, or you can get me personally at Lance Routson. It's Routson. And then I've got on Instagram, you can find me at Iowa Fire Flyer. And I also have a website, iowafireflyer.com, and you can fill out a contact form there should anybody want to get in touch and communicate. Always love to hear from people and look forward to knowing what's going on in their world and connecting. So by all means, if anybody would like to visit, feel free to reach out.
And definitely listen to that podcast, because and listen to the Flyer podcast if you guys aren't into aviation.
Yeah,
listen to them, because it is cool.
And then go take a ride in an airplane and start your lessons. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, I gotta find time for that first.
Yeah, right. I know. I'm still working on that too. But yeah.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, it's been great having you on, Lance.
Thank you so much, Taylor. You're the bomb.
Oh, thank you.
Love your show, and thank you for everything that you do.
All right, everybody. As always, I have no idea what I'm talking about next week, because I've tried to make promises even here within the last month, and I always keep getting it wrong. So I don't know what I'm talking about next week, but it's going to be a good one. So have a good night, day, whatever time you're listening to this, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya. Thanks for coming by and listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a rating and review wherever you're listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Couplings Fire Podcast. See you next time, everybody.